Hi, Karen Romano Young back with another chapter of A Girl, a Raccoon, and the Midnight Moon by me, with pictures by Jessixa Bagley, published by Chronicle Kids in 2020. Chapter 24, Coyotes, September 30th. Pearl left a note on the bottom basement step for Mary Ann. She had written it out carefully, sitting in her nook, revised it, and copied it over by hand, not wanting anyone to see it on a screen or in the printer. Even if it wasn't addressed to the editor of a newspaper, it was her best effort at a persuasive letter to a city reporter. Yoicks wasn't the only one covering this neighborhood. After this, she climbed the ladder to the mezzanine of the reading room, where the public was not allowed to go. It had long been closed off for being rickety. She scooted under the railing close to the end of the alphabet, where the stacks were full of Time magazine and U.S. News and World Report and Utne Reader. These are all real publications. Then inside her head, she walked through the stories she had been writing, putting in more than one of Francine's cuckoo ideas, enough to make her a contributor, but certainly not a co-author. Vincent waking sweetly that summer morning, discovering that her head is missing, screaming with devastation, and setting off to walk through the neighborhood, demanding its return, pledging books in exchange. Until she got her head, she would hunt down everyone in the neighborhood individually, promising the exact right story for every single one of them. If only they'd come to the library and pay homage to her by making an offering, bowing down and dancing around her pedestal, or just taking out some books and raising circulation and making the library look good. Pearl thought the rest of her story over for what must have been the 19th time. It pleased her. It was kind of over the top with the drama. Pearl thought kids would like it. It was good and horrifying. Simon came down the back hall with Jonathan Yoicks. "Oh, beautiful," Yoicks was saying. Pearl watched him take a number of pictures of the reading room's pretty iron vines, the old-fashioned sliding ladder, the afternoon light coming on dusty beams through the garden windows. She knew Yoicks didn't know she was up here. Simon told Yoicks, "May as well photograph it while you can." "Exactly," said Yoicks. "What's left of old New York." He glanced around the stacks. "Do you know about Jacob Riis and his photographs? One of the first activist journalists, helped get policies changed regarding child labor." "What did he photograph?" asked Simon. "People, the way they really lived. A side of New York that most of the people who could afford a newspaper never knew existed." Simon brightened. "You mean your paper's looking for real-life stories? You've come to the right place. Publicity would really help the library right now, and if you can get it in the paper before the library board votes about letting builders propose putting apartments here, destroying, a cultural paradise, that would be great." Yoicks sighed. "That's not exactly the type of story I'm looking to do," he said. "My editor is looking for—" "Dramatic breaking news," Pearl called down from above. Yes, and if I'm the one to deliver it—" "If you are, so what?" asked Simon. Yoicks' eyes bugged a little. "Well, then I might. Sure, if you're lucky, a fire truck might crash into a cop car and you'll be there on the scene to take a picture with your phone," said Simon. "Congratulations, I could do that too. So could anybody. Or you could do what this Jacob Riis guy did." "Jacob Riis documented poverty," said Yoicks. Jacob Riis documented poverty, said Yoicks. "He showed the conditions people were living in, and when people saw his photographs, they were shocked at the human condition." "Exactly," said Simon. "So he documented the way things were, which meant he was on hand while they changed. Not just at the sad end or the scary beginning." "You could do that here," said Pearl. "Show what things are like normally on Lancaster Avenue, instead of writing stories about awful things that happen one time only." "Exactly," said Simon. "Call it human interest. That again." Yoicks looked thoughtful. "Well, this sure is a side of New York most people don't think exists anymore," he said. "No one wants to come down here." "Down here? What if you already lived down here?" said Simon. "Yeah, what if this is your side of New York?" said Pearl. Yoicks winced. I'm sorry, kiddos. I don't mean it like that. It is called downtown. That isn't what you meant, Pearl said. You meant people don't want to come down in life. You meant that we're in a part of the city people are scared of. Below her, she saw Mom in the doorway listening. Do you think it's scary? Yoik stood back and peered up at the mezzanine and Pearl. I do not, said Pearl stubbornly. But she remembered last spring when they'd gone to visit the new Knickerbocker branch library, how clean and shiny it was with all those computers, nothing old or crumbling about it. It didn't smell of old wood. It smelled more of new paint than books, but it was still, well, she had to say it, nice. But jealous? Her? Hardly. After all, the Knickerbocker surely did not have raccoons in the basement. This is where we live, said Simon defensively. What are we supposed to do about it? I'm sorry, said Yoix. I like this library too. Pearl piped up. But you don't like the neighborhood? No, said Yoix bluntly. But I know the story is important. That's why I'm here now. I want the library to be remembered. There was a silence in which Pearl realized what he was up against. The same thing the library had been up against before she screamed, and after too. If there was anything Pearl could understand, it was the need for good stories. And once people expected them, well, you had to deliver. Work on it, she said. How? He asked. You're the reporter, she responded. Before he could get annoyed, Mom said, and if you can get your story in the paper the day the library board votes, October 2nd, that would be great. The board is voting on whether to take the building proposal seriously. It needs to see enough value in the library to at least send the decision about how to use the building to the district vote. Whether to take the building proposal seriously, repeated Yoix, and that depends on whether the board thinks our branch is valued by the neighborhood, said Mom. On whether the building would be worth more sold as real estate. Horrors, said Yoix. For the first time, Pearl smiled at him. I mean it, he told her. But she could already see that. He turned back to Mom. Do you think they'll accept the proposal? I do, said Mom. They have to. It's just good business. Then what? Then we'll have a very short time period to win neighborhood support and make everyone here want to vote for the library over apartments. A sidebar about persuasion. Persuasion is the art of convincing someone that they want to do what you want them to do. I present Pearl's letter as a case study concerning the power of the pen, the power of the public schools, where I presume she learned to write such a letter, and the power of persuasion. Dear Marianne, why not Miss Malamar? Because we were past such formalities. Since you are a library resident and the local expert on raccoons, establishes the reason for writing to this person, and a little flattery can't hurt. I would like to ask you to give me your opinion about a story I am working on. Establishes the goal of the letter. It is not very long and won't take you much time. I can leave it on the step like this, and you can return it at your convenience. Makes an offer that seems easy. It concerns local characters and settings, and I hope you will find it interesting. Makes the proposal seem personally appealing to the addressee. With this story, we just might save the Lancaster Avenue branch of the New York City Library. Raises the stakes, makes the reader feel like part of something grand, aims for the heart. You will want to be a part of it. Call to action. Yours truly, Pearl A. Moran, by M.A.M. Listen, here's my plan, said Simon hurriedly. We're going to have a rock concert. When? Yoix said. Halloween, Simon said. If we can get people to come to the garden, if they like the library well enough, maybe that will convince the neighbors to vote for it. Hey, Francine and I have a Halloween plan too, Pearl said. But just then Yoix's cell phone rang. Yoix, he said into it. He listened a moment, then said, got it. He said to the library people, got a dash. Yoix pointed up at Pearl and said, I want you to tell me more later. Then he was gone, Mom following in his wake. Typical. Pearl let her feet dangle over the edge of the mezzanine and looked down at Simon. If growing up for Pearl was a river with grown-ups on one shore and on the other little kids with no worries about real life and real problems, then Simon was a rock in the middle of the stream, a safe landing spot where she could check whether her little kid ideas could work with grown-ups, or if they would get ignored or laughed at. But lately, Simon seemed different, quieter, busy inside his head, older, more worried. Was this what happened when you were a teenager? I lost my spot. How long ago was it that he'd brought her almond cookies and sat on the floor of the children's room to read her picture books, the two of them giggling until Alice lost patience? When Pearl was younger, she had always thought she was Simon's best friend. Since she had been Simon's best friend here, she'd thought then she must be his best friend everywhere. Now she realized this idea was one of those little kid ideas, something she'd thought of when she didn't realize the world existed outside the library. Now she knew Simon had secrets. Lately, she felt on the outside of things with him. But he was still her rock. She wanted to believe that. Pearl folded a card catalog card into a paper airplane and flew it down toward Simon's fiery head. He looked up. His eyes had dark circles under them. "You look like a raccoon," she said, and immediately thought it was a dumb way to open the subject. "What's the matter with your eyes?" she asked. "Didn't you sleep last night?" Simon shook his head and mimed playing a guitar. "All night?" "It felt like it," he said. "I had to. I have to get better or I won't get into Berkeley." That was the music school in Boston that he wanted to go to. He put both his hands on his head and rubbed his hair hard. Then he kept his hands up there and didn't say anything for a minute. Poor Simon. She was glad she had something to distract him with. "Speaking of raccoons," she continued, "have you ever thought about the raccoons around here? How tame they are?" "If by tame you mean well adapted, I guess they'd have to be to survive the mean streets." He was clearly still mad about the way Jonathan Yoicks had described their neighborhood. "Do you," she flipped through some verbs in her mind, "think, believe, know, realize they can read?" "Reading raccoons, that would be a good one." Simon wasn't put off by Pearl's goofy raccoon suggestion, but his mind was already moving on. "Pearl, remember when you said the bandits? Is that because they look like bandits, or because a bunch of them is called a band?" "Huh, I don't know what a bunch of them is called." I could have told her, and I would tell her when she asked. A bunch of raccoons is called a mask or a gaze. And if you don't think that's beautiful, you mustn't be a lover of words or raccoons. "Well, a bunch of coyotes is called a band," said Simon. "Coyotes? Bruce says there are actual wild coyotes around here, but they're too smart to ever let you see them. Ow!" Her howling didn't make Simon laugh. "Why do you ask?" Pearl said. But Simon wouldn't answer and seemed distracted. He didn't seem to have heard her about the raccoons either. Thanks for listening. See you tomorrow. Crash.